EduTalk series this evening, hosted by Biotone EduPartner Program, and massage industry experts. With the continuing challenges facing massage schools, students, and practicing therapists during COVID-19, the EduTalk series supports virtual learning by connecting you with industry experts who will share their knowledge and expertise on topics not only for class discussion, but for career success. Tonight's experts are Cherie Sohnen-Moe and Laura Allen Clayton, two powerhouses in the massage industry whose books you may recognize. Cherie is author of Business Mastery and co-author of The Ethics of Touch and Retail Mastery. Laura, as well, has written numerous books, and one particular on ethics entitled Nina McIntosh, The Educated Heart, Professional Boundaries for Massage Therapists and Body Workers. Laura also writes an ethics column for Massage and Bodywork magazine entitled Heart of the Body Worker. Both Laura and Cherie have over 60 years combined experience in the massage industry, and both have been inducted into the Massage Therapy Hall of Fame. Laura is currently the President of Sales and Marketing at Cryoderm, and Cherie is the past President of the Alliance for Massage Therapy Education. Let's listen and learn as Laura and Cherie share how to create healthy boundaries while in school. This is part one of a two-part ethics series, and tonight's talk will review dual relationships, best practices for family and friends, and how to develop clear boundary policies for career longevity and practice success. Please use the tab in the upper right-hand corner to bring the gallery view up so you see both Laura and Cherie on the screen at the same time. And thank you so much for joining us. Should you have questions during the talk, please use the chat box and we'll have those answered at the end of the session. Thank you again, and Cherie and Laura, take over.
Thank you, Donnell. Laura and I really enjoy any opportunity that we have that we can get together and just talk, because frankly we like talking and we like talking with each other, or singing or whatever it is, but particularly when we're talking about either ethics or business. And today we're going to really focus on boundaries in school. And we're going to start with talking about dual relationships, because oftentimes what happens is we get thrown into this as soon as you start school. So before we get into how to manage them, let's talk a little bit about what dual relationships really are. So Laura, do you want to take that for a moment?
Well, in a nutshell, it's just when you have more than the professional relationship with someone. And when we're in massage school, we all tend to practice on our friends and family. So we're coming right out of the gate with dual relationships, which is actually something to be discouraged and it's not always possible. I live in a very small town, and when I went to massage school, friends and family were the pickings that I had to choose from to do practice massage on. So basically it's just whenever you have more than a professional relationship, either friends, family, or even a business relationship, or your child's teacher, or something of that nature.
And also in schools, a lot of schools, now I know over the years many have changed their policies, but a lot of schools have the students work on the teachers and vice versa. And again, that just creates another dual relationship. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad or good, but there are always a little bit of risks. There are some dangers in having dual relationships. And I know there's some people that say you should never, ever, ever have a dual relationship. And like Laura, like you said, it's like, well, when you live in a small town, guess what? That's impossible to not have dual relationships. other times dual relationships can really be of benefit. But there are hazards. And are there any specific hazards that kind of come to your mind, Laura?
Well, as far as the hazards go, I will say that when it is our friends or family that we're working with, whether we're a student or a professional, you know, we sometimes take the focus off of the session, which is what it should be on, and instead we gossip about the family news, or you know, our shared circle of friends, or we're talking about this and that, and it may almost seem like it's a social visit, and the massage has become secondary to that. So the main thing is to always be client-centered, and that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, chatting throughout the whole thing. So, and you know, some clients want to talk, and that'll be the case while you're a student as well. There are some clients that want to talk, but we need to be very mindful not to be chatty Cathy throughout the whole session.
Right. And sometimes, and even once you're in practice, like you said, it could, you know, this isn't something that is just with school and just with your family, but absolutely with your friends. And, you know, I had a friend who was my friend long before I became a massage therapist. And when I started in practice, I'd say the first year of working on her went really well. You know, we kept really good boundaries, and the session was all to her. But then things started getting a little lax. We started talking more about other things and social things and this and that. And outside of session, she'd ask me, well, what does it mean when this is like this? You know, and it was just like, at one point, it's like, oh, wait a second, we need to set some different boundaries. And so we did, and I created this little ritual of, you know, I would literally take a big step to the left and say, okay, I'm no longer your friend, I'm now your therapist. And then when we were done, it was like, okay, session's done, big step to the right, now I'm your friend. And that worked. And, you know, but it's not so easy with family. Family adds another challenge to that.
It does, and I've said for years, you know, I don't massage my mother. It has to be a really dire emergency for me to massage my mother. I'll pay one of y'all to massage her, right? Because if I'm the one doing the work, then she's going to be telling me all the family news of who's married and who's died, and, you know, all of that kind of stuff, and talking about family stuff. My mother really needs massage, and so if she is getting massage from someone else, she will be focused on that. She won't be chatting about all the family news. So I do think there's a difficulty there that we all face when we're working with family and friends.
And also, particularly when you're in school, I mean, you're not charging for your sessions, and you're having to work on all these people. And I find a lot of times people, and we're going to end this with talking about some boundaries and how to set policies, but a lot of times your friends and family are the ones that are going to walk all over you. They're the ones that are going to cancel at the last minute, show up late, be a little disrespectful.
Can I pay you next week?
Well, yeah, but if it's when you're a student, they don't get to pay you, you know, so it's even more. And, you know, I think that those are some of the issues, and we'll talk about some of the policies. But also, I'd also like to really touch on students and teachers and how that can become problematic. Because let's say you're a teacher working on a student and something gets revealed in that session. You know, it might have been an emotional release or whatever happens, and now you have information about that student that you would not have normally had. And that can impact you. It can bias you. We all hope that we won't be, but it certainly can. So that's one danger. And the other danger is just this whole aspect of bias. Many, many years ago when I was teaching in a massage school, and this is going to date me horrendously. This is, you know, before you could go online and buy tickets to go to movies. And there was an opening movie that I wanted to go see, and I had really sprained my leg bad. So I'm on crutches. And during one of the breaks, we were just sitting in class still, and we're talking, and one of the students said that, he was going to go see that movie, and I said, oh yeah, my husband and I are going to go too. And I made some joke about, standing in line with these crutches is going to be a whole lot of fun. And so he said, look, I'm going, let me buy the tickets so you don't have to wait in line. And then you can, and I just paid him for the tickets. I thought that was no big deal, right? We weren't going to sit with him. He wasn't paying me. He was just going to do that. I got to tell you, for like the next week, people teased him all week about being teacher's pet. And even though neither one of us did anything to do that, and there was no harm that came from that, but there certainly could have. And could you imagine if it had been something that was even more like going out to lunch with a student? Yeah, so you have to be cautious.
Yes, you do, and I think it's inherent that the teacher has to be the responsible party.
Yep.
While we're in school, the teacher is the one responsible for not only teaching boundaries, but for modeling good boundaries and maintaining those. The burden of responsibility is on us.
Yeah. So, it's being in school can be a really wonderful experience, but it can also be really challenging. The thing that I really like about it is it really does teach you how to have good boundaries if you are willing to take that lesson, which will greatly impact the rest of your whole life. So I do know that it's interesting because some schools, they don't have students work on their families and friends. But with COVID, there was like no choice. So a lot of people were having to go back on their policies and their protocols. And yet, I don't know whether they have addressed the potential boundary issues that could arise because of that or not. So if any of you are teachers and that's your case, please remember to just touch on that and kind of coach your students into how to handle those dual relationships.
Yes. COVID didn't exist back when I was in massage school. But we were actually obligated to not only work in the student clinic, but to do 75 massages outside of school. So who are you going to call on? You're going to call on your family and friends. And I very quickly realized that I only needed to give 1 or 2 massages to the same person and then be recruiting other people, because I think the potential for resentment is there also, and we all want to enjoy our work and not have resentment about it. But if you give your best friend a massage, free as a student every week for the entire time that you're in school or however long you're obligated to do it, and then the day you get your license and you say, oh, by the way, now it's $75, and maybe they just don't have the money or they're not going to budget it for that, it can create ill will. So I do warn people to be careful about that whenever they're in school, and just if you are recruiting your family and friends, just be mindful of that, and maybe don't give a dozen massages to the same person. Plus, you need to get your hand on as many bodies as possible with as many different problems as possible, and that's the best way to go about that, is by getting them on it. Get your hands on as many different people as you can.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think if there's anything else in terms of that with dual relationships, with setting boundaries. I think as a teacher, like Laura, how you said, you need to be the one who really models this and models good boundaries. So start to really look, and I know we've got a lot of educators on this call, to really look and see, how are you modeling good boundaries? Do you have good boundaries with your coworkers? How are you showing respect for them? I remember one time I was teaching, and a student started to complain about another teacher, and I stopped that person in the track, even though it was on a break time, but it was in my room, I could hear it. And I just said, this is really not appropriate. If you have an issue with that teacher, you need to talk to that teacher directly. And if you can't resolve it, then you go to faculty. but grousing about it is not going to solve anything anyway. You know, and so it's like I stood up for that teacher, and I actually knew the teacher didn't do what the student said she did. That was kind of beside the point. So we have to show that we keep good boundaries. And you know, I don't have any answers on some of these, you know, because you know there's some people that say, oh yeah, don't ever even go have, you know, lunch with a student on your break, or you know, and I don't know if that's realistic or practical. You know, I think you have to follow what your policies are at your school. But if you do it, then just take care that you are not overly doing self-disclosure.
Yes.
You know, that you are, you know, keeping it on a very light social level. And, you know, what about you, Laura? You have.
Well, you know, if it's one thing for the teacher to accompany the whole class
Right.
out somewhere for lunch, it's something else entirely to take one student to lunch. And, you know, if everyone in the class knows that, there's going to be some ill will and resentment there. Even if it was perfectly innocent, you know, other people are just going to be going, well, she doesn't take me to lunch, I wonder what's wrong with me, or that kind of thing. So we do have to set the example and model good behavior. And you know, this is an ethics talk, but for the benefit of any educators that are on here, there are teachable ethics moments in every single class, no matter what the subject matter is. There are those moments that pop up. Seize the moment and give a little ethics lesson right there in the moment, because real life ethical dilemmas are going to happen at different stages of the process. They can happen when someone walks in your door or on the way out the door. It might not necessarily happen on the table. So we have to be careful and model that good behavior for our students.
Absolutely. Shall we start talking about some policies?
I love policies. It's one of my
Okay.
pet subjects.
All right. So why don't you kick us off then?
Well, I think that sometimes the massage therapists, especially those who intend to work by themselves, might think that they don't need to have any written policies. That's really not true. The best thing to do is to head off an ethical dilemma before it happens. And so by having policies, and I'll give you an example. Maybe you don't think of a cancellation policy as an ethical thing, but it can be. I mean, if it starts affecting your income, that you're getting so many last minute cancellations and or you know, people showing up late and that kind of thing. If you don't have a clear policy on cancellations, a clear policy on late arrivals, a clear policy about everything from that to, you know, sexual behavior will not be tolerated, payment expected at the time of service, and on and on and on. I have a whole list of policies, and I'm taking a pause. I do still practice massage therapy. I'm taking a pause right now because of COVID. And I just renewed my license a couple of weeks ago. I plan to go back. But, you know, the very first year that I was in business, for myself, I didn't have written policies, and I can't tell you how many things that popped up that in the moment I'm going, oh my God, what am I supposed to do now? So actually, after I read Nina's book for the first time, I realized, you know, she talks a lot about policies in there, and I realized, oh boy, we all need policies. If you go to work for a franchise or a spa, or you're employed by someone else, you will have to abide by their policies, but that doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't have, you know, ethical policies of your own. And if you will think about things beforehand, such as, you know, people coming late or people canceling at the last minute and that kind of thing, sit down and write down some of the ways while you're still in school. Sit down and write down some of the ways that you could handle that without sounding like their parent or, you know, sounding real judgmental or whatever, but just being firm and professional. And I did always like one thing Nina always said, which is that, you know, informing your clients of your policies is just an educated way of being kind. And it really is, but policies only work if you inform people of what they are. So they need to be on your website.
Right, and you enforce them. If you don't enforce one of them, then people are going to think that none of your policies are enforceable.
That's very true. And again, especially if you live in a rural area or in a small town, and, you know, this person tells the other person, well, I blew off an appointment and she didn't charge me for it. Word gets around in a small town, folks. And so that can really create some problems for you with clients if you don't treat that's the purpose of having a policy. You would treat everyone, you want to have fair policies, treat everyone fairly and treat everyone equally, because if you find yourself making exceptions to your policies, that's a red flag, and why are you doing that?
Right. Emergencies happen, occasional exceptions, but again, I would look, like you said, look at why is that happening, and maybe you need to change the policy. You know, if you keep having to make exceptions, then that policy doesn't work. So you need to find a different way to have that policy. And I really encourage you to do this as a student. Create your policies, even just because they're not paying you, there can be consequences, you know, and you know, require them. Say, look at, and you can just say, blame Laura and I for this, you know, that, you know, we were told we really need to practice this, so we're going to create our policies, and, you know, we need to enforce them and see how that's like. See what it's like when you have to enforce it when somebody comes late. Get that practice and look at that as a learning experience while you're a student, not as, oh my gosh, this is so horrendous. How do I deal with this?
Well, I'd say, Cherie, that after our combined 60 years, you and I have made every mistake in the book.
At least once.
and long ago, we made every mistake in the book long ago. And you know, we do have the need for policies, and that's a way to prevent things from happening. Right. Instead of trying to deal with it and come up with some, you know, solution in the moment. If you have written policies, then you have something to go by. And I do get totally what you're saying about, you know, making exceptions. Now, one of my personal pet projects has always been working with cancer patients. And I totally get it that if people are on chemo, radiation, or whatever, that they may wake up in the morning and not feel like coming to their appointment. It was my personal policy not to penalize those people. Right. And just reschedule them whenever they felt well. Again, I did not make them pay for the session, but that's just me, you know. So everyone can, if you do find yourself constantly bending your policy, then maybe you need to change the policy.
Right. Yeah. And you know, policies, yes, they're written on paper, they're not written in stone. You can change them, you can alter them. But I do encourage you to make policies that feel good and that honor yourself and honor those clients, whether they're paying clients or not. So everyone is being honored for their participation in this experience together, and you're being honored for your expertise in your work.
Donnell has passed along a question here. Are we going to talk about those, or are we waiting until the end?
Well, I don't even know what time it is anymore. So let's ask, let's address those questions.
Okay. The question was, how has the Me Too movement affected overall ethics? What's your opinion on that, Cherie?
Well, I don't know whether it's affected ethics. I think it's brought more awareness. So in that way, it has affected. People are being more conscious about the continuum of sexual misconduct. You know, because so what's really interesting in terms of ethics, you know, yes, having sex with a client, that's, you know, wrong, you know, but it's all that area over here where little infractions can happen. And a lot of times people really aren't aware of the impact of that. And I think that that's really been a big change. I think that people are more willing to speak out. I know that a lot of places have put in much better protocols for dealing with that. You know, a lot of the franchises that got called on the carpet for not following through, you know, most of them have really gone through and revamped and reasserted their policies and created new policies. And, you know, if the individual franchisor doesn't follow them, there's not a whole lot they can do unless they find out about it. But, you know, a lot of changes has been made because of that. And people are feeling more willing to call it out when it happens.
Yes, and you know something, I've always been a big fan of calling it out since day one.
Yeah.
Of my career. I started taking classes about 5 years before I finally dragged myself to massage school. So I started taking classes back in 1993. And, you know, I had a few experiences. Of course, now that I'm old and over the hill, I don't really have those anymore. But, you know, something, the moment, the very instant that something inappropriate is said or done in the massage room, you have to address that right that moment. If you don't, you have just given that person permission to carry on with whatever kind of bad behavior that they had in mind. So it may be not a blatantly sexual comment. For example, maybe they're testing the water, and people will do that.
Yeah.
Males and females both. Yeah. I employed both males and females in my clinic for many years. And I've seen, you know, guys that my male therapists were hit on just the same as the female therapists were hit on. Mm-hmm. And so you have to grab that bull by the horns immediately. My personal way of handling that was just to take a step back from the table and say, that's inappropriate. This is therapeutic massage. Nothing sexual is going to be happening here, and sexual comments will not be tolerated. Would you like to continue under my conditions, or would you prefer to get up and leave? And by the way, you owe me $75 on the way out the door. So you have to nip it in the bud, as Barney Fife would say, right there. Nip it in the bud.
Right. Yeah. Because it'll only escalate. You know, a little comment here, a little comment there. You know, again, you know, sometimes you take that first one and it's like, okay, but if there's ever even a second one, then it's like, okay, if I miss that first one, I'm definitely going to say, I do not appreciate, I like tolerate, but sometimes, you know, I don't appreciate, I don't tolerate whatever sexual comments, and you cannot do that if we're going to continue. You know, and so you can do that without, I mean, because some people, they're predators. And the interesting thing is that there's nothing you can do about a predator. You can't change a predator's behavior in terms of training, and because they don't care. But the majority of people, whether it's clients or therapists, that do ethical violations, the majority of time it's out of stupidity. They're just not paying attention, they're not thinking, and they're saying something or doing something that just that can really set somebody off. And again, the thing you have to be really conscious of, as from the therapist's point of view, not even, you know, not from a client doing something, but sometimes, you know, if someone has had a background of physical or sexual abuse, which, you know, we're talking 1 in 3 people have had something like that happen. You never know. You could be just, you know, touching them on their shoulder, and if they were dragged down by that shoulder, it could trigger all sorts of stuff. So we have to be really aware and create those boundaries of safety for yourself as a client, as a therapist, as well as a client. But the bottom line is, if you ever do not feel safe, get your butt out the room.
Exactly.
You know, there is no excuse for you. You know, you can always go back and get your table if you're doing an out call, you know, or the heck with the table. Your safety is not worth it. And, you know, if you're really feeling unsafe, just leave.
I've always advised therapists to keep their keys and their cell phone turned off, but to keep it on their person.
Yep.
You know, if they work alone, or if they're doing out calls. Now, you know, if you're in a big practice with a dozen people,
Right.
It'll be hard for, you know, somebody to really get away with something. Surely someone, a coworker, will hear you scream or knock on the wall.
Right.
But if you're going into people's homes to do out calls, or you're working in an office by yourself, safety is the priority. And, you know, it's not always the client who is inappropriate. In regards to Cherie saying the word predator, I figured out long ago that there are a certain amount of people who get into massage because they are a predator, and they have figured this is a good place to meet a fresh crop of victims all the time. So we recently had a therapist lose their license in this state. I'm in North Carolina, that he molested 12 women. And this was in a 2-month time period. And so by the time the first one complained, you know, boards tend to move kind of slowly, and sometimes the police may as well. And by the time the first complaint was actually being settled by the board, by that time 11 more women had come forward about this therapist. So
yeah,
we have to carry the torch there for ethical behavior, and the way to do that is to just always behave ethically and don't tolerate any unethical behavior from clients.
So this was taking a turn and we didn't expect. We got more questions. So someone said, as a therapist, would you suggest getting a list of sex offenders in my area? Well,
there's no guarantee that they would give their correct name when they
exactly.
call. They know they print those little magazines you see in convenience store with the pictures of the people that have been arrested. No guarantees on that, but yeah, it might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, but there are no guarantees. And then also, you know, sometimes a lot of people on that sex offender list are, you know, 18-year-olds who had sex with a 16-year-old, and it was consensual, but the parents filed charges. So I mean, there's some people on that list that, you know, that's not going to tell you whether they're going to be appropriate. But if you have good boundaries and you are doing things to keep yourself safe, it doesn't matter if they're a predator or not, and you get any sense of that, you end that session, whether you know anything about them or not.
That's true.
You are the one who deserves to be safe, whether it's from a sexual harassment or violation, whether it's from people crossing your boundaries and taking advantage of your warmth and generosity. You know, we need to learn to start setting boundaries to take care of ourselves, because you are taking care of so many people. The work that you do, you know, you are giving your heart to all these people when you're doing your work. So you need to take care of yourself.
You know, a lot of times massage therapists get into this work because they say, oh, I just want to help people.
Right.
And we all do. But, you know, most of us need to make a living, unless you're independently wealthy and you're just doing this for a hobby. You know, having good boundaries can protect your finances, and it can protect your mental health. We all want to, you know, come home from work at the end of the day feeling satisfied that we did the best that we could for people and that we were able to help somebody, but we also don't want that sapped feeling of, oh, I just give it my all day, I don't have anything left, and there's nothing left for you. So take care of yourself, practice self-care, get your boundaries together. By the time you get out of school, make that your goal before you get out of school, to start putting those boundaries in place, and they'll serve you well for the rest of your career.
Yeah. So Donnell's back. Does that mean we're up? We're done?
I see Donnell again.
That's it. This has been fascinating and you know, great discussion and a lot of food for thought for students as well as therapists in practice. I think it's very, very interesting. And Yes, we do need to wrap it up. So I haven't seen any other chat questions come through. So what I would like to do is mention that part 2 of your ethics talk will be on November 24th, and it's ethical practice management. Additionally, everyone, between now and then, please watch your in-basket for invitations to upcoming EduTalks. We have an October 13th EduTalk on new massage therapy safety practices in the COVID era. October 27th, we have Cherie returning for how to add retail to your practice, which with the holidays coming, that might be something to think about. November 10th, we have total body balancing with Carrie D'Ambrosia. And then on November 24th, we have part 2 with Cherie and Laura again, a return engagement. And that will be part 2, again, ethical practice management. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Laura and Cherie, I see that both of you by your name on your images have your website. So in wrapping up, if there's anything you'd like to say to our wonderful audience that bared with us tonight through technical challenges, please do.
We just thank everybody for being here. We both really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And we look forward to meeting again next, well, 2 months.
Well, great. One of our technical difficulties is, Laura, you have become the host of this evening. So if you would, in the lower right-hand corner, where it says leave, there should be a red box. If you could scroll over that.
And hit end.
Yes.
All right, folks. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.